when you're in a rock and roll band, you really just sort of have one job. And I think you should be able to show up at the studio and everybody should be able to play their instruments. And you don't need a producer to put it together for you. Well, I mean, all things considered, I'm just one of those people who really sort of thinks in the present. I never look too far in the past, and I definitely never look too far into the future. So, when I first hooked up with Myles, it was about that record and that tour. And then during that tour, we started writing music for what ended up being Apocalyptic Love. And it's just been snowballing like that. I never thought about this far into the future at that time. And so when we actually got here to where we are now, and we've been together for 12 years and this is our fourth record, I was sort of shocked. It didn't even occur to me that we've been together that long. So no, I wouldn't even have started to imagine that we'd be together at this point in time. Just something that happened organically when we first met. I actually heard Myles sing an original lyric and melody to one of my pieces of music before I ever heard him sing anything else, but also before I ever met him. And that first thing that that we collaborated on was really special. And so that was a demo. I sent him a piece of music, and he wrote this song called Starlight. And when I first heard the demo, I was like, wow, that's amazing. I've never met this guy. So he flew out to LA, and we met at the studio, and we hit it off really well, like instantaneously. It was just a certain kind of magic chemistry right there. And then we recorded the studio version of that song. And I had another piece of music that I didn't have any vocals on. And I asked him if he'd be interested in singing that. And that was a song called Back from Cali. So those two songs were just off the cuff. And that's really sort of how our whole collaborative process started. And it hasn't really changed that much. I just come up with pieces of music, and he just naturally comes up with something cool for it. And we've just been sort of going like that. But we get along really well on a personal level, and I think we definitely inspire each other, and we have a great live chemistry as well. So it just works. Well, I mean, to start, Dave Cobb is a huge fan of Glenn Johns. Glenn Johns really admires his work over the years. And obviously, Glenn Johns has done so many iconic rock and roll records, from The Who to the Stones to Zeppelin, and that list goes on and on. And I'm a big fan of his because he was one of those handful of really great trailblazing engineers from the late 60s and through the 70s, and was responsible for some of my favorite rock and roll records. So when Dave Cobb mentioned him, I was like, that's exactly the direction that I want to be going in. I mean, we had a blast recording the songs. It was done totally live, and we basically went in, worked on the arrangement of the song, got it to where we wanted it, and recorded it live in the moment. And that's probably why it has a sort of jam session vibe, because it's just really just a good quality recording of us just playing in a room, I mean, we've always recorded. I've always recorded in every band I've ever been in, live to a point. Like, we all played together, and then I would go back and redo the guitars, and the vocals are always done later. And I mean, and that works great because we do capture the energy, but it's a little bit more controlled than what we were doing on this record. The plus side of that, of recording sort of like with overdubs and all that, is that you really do fine tune some stuff, and you can get the sound exactly right, and this and that and the other, and you can nitpick it to death. Whereas when you're playing it, just totally off the cuff, you dial it in the best you can, and then you just go for it, and you don't go back and fix anything. So, layered recording is it's high points is to be able to fine tune it. Its low points is you lose some of that energy. It's really just the nature of the attitude when everybody's just sort of playing off of each other in a room. It's a slightly more aggressive and definitely more raw sounding. And there's a certain energy that happens. It's one of the things that's important about how this was recorded, was you're capturing an energy that sometimes often gets sucked out when you're in the studio. But when you're playing it the way that we did it, you sort of capture all that. Not really. I mean, usually when you record something, you sort of hear all that stuff. And if there was something that really bothered you, later, you would probably have heard it when you did it. And so if you want to fix it, you can fix it. So I can't think of anything specific that I was like, God, there's that glaring mistake. But I have to admit, there are some moments on record that I can think of where there was something that I wanted to do and forgot to do and never ended up doing it, and then remembered it later and was like, oh yeah, I was going to do that, but I forgot about it. Anyway, so little things do happen that over time you realize that you might have wanted to do something different. I mean, I just know that the fascination with technological development, I guess you call it, which is great, and I'm really not knocking it, but I think what happens is you find that you can do anything you want without really having to play a note, hardly, Like I know a lot of records are made by bands who call themselves bands, but they actually are just all pieced together and they've never played an entire song. And, when you're in a rock and roll band, you really just sort of have one job. And I think you should be able to show up at the studio and everybody should be able to play their instruments, and you don't need a producer to put it together for you. But, that formula has been going on ever since pop music became popular. So, it's nothing new, but with new technology, it's just making it easier and easier to fool people into thinking they're listening to music produced by an artist when sometimes it really is not. Yeah, I mean, I have a history of not boding well during downtime. It's been the boon of my existence or my career, and so I've gotten sort of past all that. But this event that suddenly presented itself was like, okay, there's no end in sight. So I just really got to work and just started focusing on playing and writing and recording stuff and doing some sessions and, getting some Guns N' Roses stuff that needed to get done and doing, starting up this record. I really wanted to get a record done during this whole thing. So I kept myself busy to keep myself out of trouble. I think the biggest thing for me really is patience. That's something that I have very little of, and the COVID situation really forced me to observe patience. And I think I learned a lot about patience over this last couple of years.